about why the lighting's bad, you can, but don't expect me to have the answer because I do not know. Hello and welcome to Team Journey TC. You are here with Taya. Now, the first part of this review, shockingly for me, I know, it's not typically in my nature to do this kind of thing, but it's actually not going to contain spoilers, and if you want to listen to that and you haven't seen the movie yet, I promise I will give you a spoiler warning for when we get to that part. But yeah, subscribe. Just subscribe now. Don't even worry till about the end of the video if you haven't yet. And then let's do this over. Okay. Now I get why people didn't like this movie, and I know that the general consensus is that it is mediocre at best, which I obviously disagree with, as you've seen the title of this video. But I get why people didn't like this. Some parts of this movie are really quite terrible, and it didn't typically follow the mystery, like, of who's doing it, that typical great Scooby-Doo stories you tell. I think what the reviewers are missing, actually, even the ones who have positive reviews that I've seen, and then just on the few that I've seen, is the amount of heart that simply oozes out of this movie. Like, I swear I will defend this movie until the end of time. Like, this is on the same level of How to Train Your Dragon 3. It's a little bit below, but it's like same tier. And which, if you haven't seen my review of How to Train Your Dragon 3, I was literally crying. Here, I'll put the review in the iCard at the top. Is this my right or left? About that, it'll be in the iCard if you want to check that out. And in terms of this not following a typical Scooby-Doo mystery, like, I feel like people need to remember that this show is aping off of two other shows, mainly Dynamite and Captain Caveman. Really more Dynamite, which is typically not a whodunit story. And so this one really didn't feel like it needed to be. Like, I know that the title is called Scoob, so you feel like it should be a Scooby-Doo story, but, like, really it's like a Blue Falcon movie that they use Scooby-Doo for, like, obviously his character fits in well with the narrative, which I will go more into later, and who remembers Blue Falcon? Like, if they called it a Blue Falcon movie, do you think anyone would have seen this movie? Like, no one would have gone to see it. So, like, I get why, like, you could be like, oh, that's a marketing plot, whatever, but I get why they did it. And another thing that I've heard about this movie that I find really shocking that people think this is that they think that it's simply to prey on people's nostalgia, which, I mean, comes from what I just said about this not really being a Scooby-Doo movie, but I don't understand this criticism at all. This movie clearly had a unique story that it wanted to tell, and it did. And yeah, there are pieces of nostalgia, with the time jump part being, like, the same as, like, the old series, like, title credit thing, which I just thought was cool. But most of the nostalgia is more like Easter eggs, like things that people who are fans of the series will enjoy, but, like, not things that will harm your viewing experience if you don't. Like, I'm not a big Scoob fan, but my dad was, like, geeking over some stuff in the background, and I was like, what the heck are you even talking about? I was very confused, but he seemed very excited, so I assumed that there was something on screen that was nostalgia-based, and so I believe that the people making this movie use nostalgia not as, like, a way to try to market this movie, but as a way to get themselves more into the production. Like, I truly believe that this movie was made by people who love Scooby-Doo and love the franchises surrounding it, and they just really wanted to tell a story with these characters, and that's why they put these extra little things in there, more for themselves. So yeah, I'd say solid, probably like an 8 or maybe even a 9 out of 10. You should go watch it. But now I will warn you, there are spoilers up ahead, but here goes. Here's the plot. So I know some of you probably haven't seen the movie and are still watching the spoiler review anyway, so I'm just going to give you a rundown of the plots for those folks. If you don't want to watch that, which I totally understand, by the way, you can just skip to this time card. If I'm off by a few seconds, just forgive me. I've never done a time card thing before. Or you can just skip to where it says there's, like, a little screen that tells you what I'm talking about, general. So yeah, it'll say Cleverness, I think. Or I might change it, but we'll see. Anyway. Now let's continue. So the movie begins with Shaggy, who's a lonely little kid, meeting Scooby at the park. They become instant friends in, like, a really sweet moment where Shaggy gives Scooby his collar, and then they go trick-or-treating where they meet the rest of the gang. They accidentally solve a quick mystery and decide that they should do it again. They grow up, and now having money problems, they attempt to get an investor Simon Cowell. He says that Scoob and Shaggy are too silly for the group, and that's how they end up getting separated and with the Blue Falcon Gang. The Blue Falcon Gang is fighting a supervillain named Dick Dastardly, who wants to use the three skulls of I don't know if it's three skulls of Cerberus, because Cerberus is all the three giant dog skulls. Not that important whose skulls they are. And Scoob to get into the underworld. He needs Scoob because he's the last descendant of Alexander the Great's dog. Dastardly's reasoning for doing this is that he has a pet dog who's trapped down there. The Blue Falcon Gang try to stop him by going to two locations. They, however, fail, and Dastardly opens the portal, and an angry Cerberus comes out. They, however, manage to trap Cerberus back in the portal. Yada yada yada. Scoob and Shaggy are separated for the rest of eternity. Oh, never mind. They catch Dastardly, a mask-off joke, and maybe some sequel bait. Roll credits. And that's pretty much the movie. I'm calling a work of art. Let me explain, okay? They were terrible. I'm just kidding. Well, not really. I thought I would talk about the worst aspect of the movie first so I can get to the great part. There is no excuse for the jokes in this movie, okay? They are barely jokes, and weirdly obsessed with the word and the name of the character. I will not say unless referring of him, because this is a good godly Christian channel. So, anyway, but these are cringy. Most of the jokes are so cringy, and not a single one landed. Not a one landed for me. I mean, I'm obviously exaggerating, but I think I laughed a total of 5 times in the whole movie. Now, the movie, to its credit, doesn't think it's really funny, and the terrible jokes aren't too distracting. But if you're making a movie for kids, you kind of expect it to be kind of funny. And like I said, a couple funny jokes, like this one time where Velma said that she was dressed as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and after she explained that was a justice, Shaggy said she was in Slytherin. I'm not pulling off the joke well, but it was really funny in the moment. And in fact, most of the illusion jokes I think were actually pretty funny. But then there were things that I didn't even know if they were jokes or not. Like this one time, literally once and only once in the movie, Velma randomly speaks in Spanish, and I'm Hispanic, so me and my mom both looked up at the screen because we thought someone had hit the clicker by accident and switched the language. And I don't know if this was funny because it felt like a German name, and she's very clearly white, so I'm not quite sure what's happening there. I thought it was maybe a joke, but yeah. Jokes in general tended to lean towards either cringy or slapstick, which I know some people find slapstick humor funny, but I'm just really not that much of a fan. So if you do find slapstick humor funny, you might find this movie funny, but if you don't, which I think is the general consensus is that it's only kind of funny, you probably won't. So yeah. Cleverness of this movie. Okay, so the movie's incredibly dumb. Let's just start out in terms of like foreshadowing and predictability and stuff. But hear me out. It comes by it honestly. It doesn't think that its little twists are going to somehow surprise you. That's why it introduces the evidence for the twist and then reveals the twist like literally 2 minutes after. So you don't have to like deal with, I have to wait through the rest of the characters to catch up. You have to wait like 2 minutes. Like I remember one time feeling smart because I once said the treasure was in the underworld, and I figured out that Dix, for people who didn't watch the plot, that's the character. I'm not cursing. Do not show this to my colleges and try to get me banned or whatever. I don't know. Dog would be there too. But then my apparently cleverness and ability was taken away 2 seconds later when Dick just straight out says it outright. So, I mean, it clearly understands what it is and goes with it. It's not trying to be some smart movie. It knows it's not, and that's okay. Not every movie has to be Knives Out, which is one that I think, in my opinion, used foreshadowing brilliantly. This movie is not smart, and honestly, like, it's kind of refreshing to have just kind of a simpler movie. But something the movie does miraculously cleverly that it's honestly, if they noticed it, it's genius. And that's understanding how reactionary characters are often the downfall of stories. So now if you listen to my plot summary or watched the movie, you might have noticed that the gang's motivation is entirely reactionary. They simply are doing things that so that Dick doesn't get what he wants. Like, there's no personal motivation. There's no personal stakes in the matter. And it makes their desire to stop him seem, like, weak and like you don't care. While this downfall would normally devastate any movie, the issue is not a problem in Scoob, like, at all. And the reason for that being very simple. The villain wins. See, the problem with reactionary heroes typically is that you often end up rooting against them. Think She-Ra or Avengers Infinity War, which is a great movie, by the way. I'm not saying that that's a bad movie in that one, because it has strong character motives and actually fixes the problem in exactly the same way. And in some ways, so what happens with reactionary characters is that in some way you want the villain to win. And Scoob just straight out does. Yeah, he gets caught afterwards, but the audience still gets the joy from watching the main character achieve his main goal, which is finding his dog companion, which stops the movie from becoming boring because you still got to see the person you're rooting for succeed. And character. This is probably why I call the movie a work of art. The way this movie uses its characters to show its message is truly beautiful. The theme or like question of this movie is obviously the meaning of friendship and like the importance of it. And I don't think you guys truly understand how masterfully used it is in this movie. So the most obvious example that we would look at is between the protagonist, which is really, the main protagonist is really Shaggy, and then Scooby's like a secondary protagonist, and the main villain, Dastardly, ask this question. A once great reviewer, Phil Mento, you should watch him if you haven't. I'll link him somewhere, or not. He doesn't need my cloud. He's out on his own. Told me that heroes and villains should both be asking the same question to make your movie truly about something. And I think that this is something that Scoob actually does. Shaggy and Scooby both start on the positive extreme, thinking that friendship is everlasting and that they'll stick together forever and it'll be great. Dick actually starts on the negative extreme, at least represents the negative extreme to the audience. That's what's really important. Whether he actually is as a character doesn't really matter, just as long as he's representing the negative extreme to the audience by being harsh towards his friendly robots and having lost his own true friend. And it's made clear that he's upset by this loss, so that's why he's mean to other people. However, as the movie continues to progress, Shaggy starts to turn towards the negative side of the screen as Scooby is treated better and Shaggy gets jealous. This actually really did remind me of How to Train Your Dragon in a scene where Shaggy is like, you have to choose, which made me question the morals was right of this movie, because it kind of takes the exact opposite message of How to Train Your Dragon, so how can they both be right? I do not know, but it's fine. Setting aside some questionable morals, this was while Dastardly starts to begin to represent the positive side of the extreme by showing that his motives are justified through wanting to retrieve his companion. So he's not quite on the negative side of the extreme, and Dastardly's not quite on the positive extreme. They're still representing kind of they're both kind of representing the middle, but they're still representing opposite sides of the middle, so it still continues to work. And they continue to represent these opposite extremes until the end of the movie, where they both end up and being on the positive extreme, which is actually why I believe that the final battle isn't between Dastardly and Shaggy and Scooby, because typically when you have like these two opposing morals, you want them to like, I'm the better moral, you get destroyed, wow, wow, wow. Like, you imagine it kind of being like that, but in this movie, they're at the final battle point in like the third act, which is probably the weakest act, but at that point they're both here in this box that I'm saying is the gradient of positive or deities of friendship. They're both over here, so they need to, which is why they end up fighting some other monster. But not only do the main characters reveal this theme, but so does everyone else, which isn't required, but this movie just wants to have so much heart that it just decides, we'll do it. So let's look at some of our side characters. We should probably start with the esteemed gang, Daphne, Fred, and Velma. The main way these three are represented as a group would probably be through their initial fight with Shaggy and Scooby. They end up making him feel like he doesn't belong with the rest of them, which explains why Shaggy's driven to depend so much on Scooby. Actions being wrong is because they didn't really end up doing anything. But Daphne even gets her own little subplot into the theme. I know, it's really exciting. She helps a little robot who the audience has kind of grown to love at that point, and takes care of him, and they become immediately friends. This represents strongly the positive side of the extreme, as the robot truly cares for Daphne and attempts to help her in her most trying times. Their friendship is an example of how your friends should always be there for you. And the other and final example is the relationship between Brian, who's the Blue Falcon in this movie, and Dynamite. For the most part in the movie, they two seem to hate each other, and it makes sense that they would. They're polar opposites. Brian is a scaredy cat who only got into this position through his inheritance, and Dynamite knows that and doesn't like that part. And this is why they have such disdain for each other. However, they both end up learning to accept each other and who they are, and end up fighting alongside each other. They also come to the same conclusion that friendship is good. The thing where Shaggy comes back was dumb, and I don't know how they could have fixed it, and still had their emotion evade, and the movie ended happily at the end. But it was dumb, and I blah, blah.